We sang this morning of that same God that spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden and said, "Where are you?" That's the God that is here this morning. The same God that brought the Israelites through the Red Sea into the promised land. That same God is here this morning. The same God that was with Paul in prison when he was in a Roman prison bound by chains and set him free. That same God is here this morning. And when you think of it like that, it blows your mind. That God is right here. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am. So he's here. And each one of us, as we sit here this morning, we've all got our own pictures of God in our mind. Maybe for some of you, he's the judge, that old grey-haired man with a book ticking off. Okay, yeah, she did that, oops, not that. And it's like a rule book. And we are performing. Maybe it's a kind father. Or maybe you didn't have a kind father, so your picture of the Father of God is not so clear. Or maybe it's a God that just loves, and it's love, love, love. I don't know. But we're all different. We're all unique. We've all grown up in different ways, and we accumulate these images in our minds. But today, I want us to set aside whatever you think. And we're going to look at 4 statements. Our God sees. Our God hears. Our God rescues. And our God remembers. Now, where did I get that from? And there's the story of Moses when he's wandering along the desert, looking after his father-in-law's sheep. And he sees a bush off to the right, or maybe the left, and it's burning. And he says to himself, "Let me go and see what's going on." He must have been shocked. It's not normal. And as he went to the bush spoke to him, the angel of the Lord, God in the bush, and said, and I'm quoting from Exodus 3, "Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering, so I've come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." So there you have it. And he also says later, "And I am well aware of my covenant with them." And so he remembers the covenant that he had made with Abraham some 400 odd years before. That took a long time, but nevertheless, he remembers. And he says in Exodus again, chapter 6, "Therefore I say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will free you from your oppression and will rescue you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my people, and I will be your God." That's the God that we serve. Our God, whatever he is in our minds, he hears us, and he sees us, and he rescues us, and he remembers and is with us. So what does that look like for you when you hear these statements? But we can go further back in time in the Old Testament to Genesis, to the story of an Egyptian slave, a foreigner, someone who's possessed by another. the story of Hagar, the servant of Sarai, who later became Sarah, with her husband Abram, who later became Abraham, the father of the Israelite nation. God had promised Abram that he would be the father of many nations, and that through him all nations would be blessed. And yet by the time he and his wife were 86 years old, they had no children. So they decided to take things into their own hands. And we may not understand today the customs of that time, but Sarah said, "Here, take my slave woman," and that's my wife. And and she gave her slave to Abraham, and she became pregnant. And so Hagar, being human, she said, "Okay, I'm the one now. The heir to Abraham is coming through me. Fantastic." And she became cocky and provoked her mistress. And I'm superior. I'm the one. And you can imagine how it must have played out with Sarai. She got angry. She got jealous. And so here we have two people behaving badly. And Abram's wife said, "Well, what must I do now? You need to decide." So Abram said, "No, she's yours. You decide." And so there we have the head of the household of those days abdicating his responsibility. So three people behaving badly. So Sarai made life miserable for Hagar. Like really miserable, so miserable that she ran away. And you can picture the scene of how two jealous people striving for position just make it untenable. She runs away. And it says in Genesis that the angel of the Lord found her sitting beside a spring of water along the road to Shur. So she was probably trying to find her way back to Egypt. She needs help, clearly. And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Where are you going? Where are you coming from? And where are you going?" Hagar had a story. What was she going to say to the Lord, who asked her that question? And she said, "I'm running away from my mistress." And that was true. She was. But it's not the full story. She's running away because she made her mistress's life miserable, who got jealous, and so the story played out, and that's why she's running away. And we create stories in our minds in order to make sense of our lives. We create a narrative to suit our version of events and our emotions, and to protect ourselves from the ugliness and the pain of life. Our lives are a story. We understand who we are by the narrative that we create, and it's our story. But it may not be the full story. We suppress, we hide, we leave out, we embellish. Oh, I'm such a cool guy. Our memories fail us. That's how we've been wired. That's how God made us. If we were all front and center, we would go mad. So, we have a story. Hagar had a story. Not the full story is the one she's telling. But God knows the real Hagar. He knows everything about her. He knows what she'd done. He knows who she is. He knows her story. And this slave woman, this foreigner, this property of the other, she was the first person in the Bible to give God a name. The name Bir El Roy, the God who hears. And here's the verse, here's the passage. And the angel of the Lord said, "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives." And thereafter Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" So that well where they were was named Bir Lahai Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. And then he rescues Hagar. What does he do? He sends her back to her mistress. And he rescued the Israelites from the tyranny of Pharaoh, the hard life of slavery. He took them through the Red Sea into a wilderness for 40 years. He rescues us from the clutches of the evil one. He gives us new life. He fills us with his love. And we find ourselves living in the same old world with the same old issues. But God is with us. God was with Hagar. God was with the Israelites in the wilderness. God is with us today. So he rescues and he remembers. He hears and he sees. That same God who did that then is the same God that is here today. The God who hears your cry, my cry. The God who sees you in your situation, who sees me in my situation. That is the God that is in this place today, because where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he says, "I am in the midst of them." That same God is here today. And so we go back to the question, where are you coming from and where are you going? And now that's a question for us. Where are you coming from? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? We can each ask ourselves the very same question. Where are we coming from? What is your story this morning? What have you left out? What have you included? Who have you told your story to? Do we even know where we're going? We're all narrators of our own lives. To know a person is to understand the story they tell about themselves, their struggles, their triumphs, the meaning that they find. Stories are what make us human. We hear stories from when we're tiny babies. That's what mothers do, and fathers. Before we can even speak, we are hearing stories. It's how we make sense of life. And I'm sure most of you, or all of you, have got a family WhatsApp group. So do we. And just last night, in fact, up pops a video of little Taya in Joburg, 18 months old, sitting in the chair in her room with a book and a plastic horse in the chair next to us, reading in her baby language a story to the horse. And then she says, "Horsey, stay." And she goes and gets another book and continues reading. Stories. It's part of who we are. God knows our story. God sees me, and he sees you this morning. He sees the real me. He sees the real you. He knows who we really are. He knows our triumphs. He knows our despair. He knows how we feel. He knows how we don't feel. Every detail of our lives is known by God, even the things that we try and hide away, that our memories have suppressed. And being seen is perhaps one of the most fundamental needs that we as human beings have. We don't live in isolation. We're surrounded by people, whether we like it or not. And yet many of us are not seen. We're not acknowledged as a person of value. We feel as though we're shipwrecked and alone. And here's a hard statement, and I know these things that I'm saying are hard things today, and they touch us deeply. But to be unseen is not neutral. It's not a neutral condition, it's an aggression. When you fail to see someone, you're not just ignoring them. You're treating them as insignificant. You're implying that their life doesn't matter. And that comes from a man, David Brooks. He's written a book, How to Know Someone. It's fairly current. And that's quite a profound statement. But I think it's true. When you feel unseen, you don't mean anything to anyone. But I say this to you today, you mean something to God. You do. Every single person sitting in this place, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you've come from or where you're going, you mean something to God. And so we have our stories. And there's stories going around in our head all the time. I have stories. And our stories generally are negative ones. I don't know why that is, but that's how we are again. I'm not good enough. The one thing I hate in the world, and I'm a shy person. School was rough, really rough. When I felt unseen, because I never said anything to anyone. The worst thing you can take me to is to a big room of people that I don't know. I die inside. Why is that? We went to Aldous' 50th class reunion not so long ago, a couple of years ago. I mean, that's the worst place you can take me. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Who am I going to talk? Those are the stories that we tell ourselves. But when you come away from these things, it wasn't so bad. Life is so weird. And so we create these narratives in our lives that reinforce the negative and just take us to places that we don't need to go to. We don't have to go there if we told ourselves a different story. The highest value that we can place on someone is to see them, to truly see someone, not as a perfect human being, not without flaws, but to acknowledge them for who they are. Hear their story. Listen without judgment. Acknowledge their presence, and ultimately to know them. When someone takes the time to truly see us, they're not just acknowledging our existence, they're helping us to understand ourselves. Their attention towards us is a mirror in which we can glimpse our own depths, and so it becomes a conversation. And we begin to feel safe, and we begin to open up, and we begin to say things that maybe we wouldn't have said before because we're hiding. But when we feel seen, we feel safe. And I would venture to say to you today that this can be the most difficult thing to do with those that are closest to us. Familiarity creeps in. We begin living our lives separately, and all of a sudden, who are you? We haven't spoken for so long. Haven't seen you. Haven't listened. So busy. So lost in my own life. I've drifted apart. What has happened? In order to see someone, we need to be there with them. Make time for them. Set aside our own desires and maybe do things that we didn't want to do. When we first got married, I don't know how this tradition happened, but back in the day, we used to every Saturday morning go out for coffee. And there were no cappuccinos then, it was just old filter coffee. No croissants and all these fancy things we get nowadays. It was a raisin bun. And we used to sit across the table for each other and have a coffee and a raisin bun. And I'll tell you this, because when you take yourself out of your context at home, where you sit on the couch, and this happens all the time in my house, and Aldous will see that thing that's not working. And so I'll get told to fix it. And the last thing in the world I want to do is fix it. And so when you're sitting in a coffee shop with a cup of coffee and a raisin bun, you see each other and you can talk to each other. And this tiny piece of advice, take it and do that. Maybe uncomfortable, may not be an easy thing to do, but do something like that, where you are forced into one another's company to see one another. Because each one of us is a mystery until we explore one another's stories. My story is a long one, 70 years long. Your story may be 20 years long, but both are valid. Both probably include joy. Both probably include suffering of some kind. Both include fears. Both include hopes. Both are worth listening to. Both are real. Both of us have something to say to each other. So let's say it. No generational divide, doesn't have to be. We just have to listen to one another's stories and get to know each other. So, who's in your story? Who are the people in your life that see you? Who have you surrounded yourself with? Who is feeding into your life? Reflecting back to you? Who is your mirror? Nothing and nobody exists in this world whose very being does not presuppose a spectator. We don't live in isolation. There's always someone, somewhere, looking at us. Always. We can't live alone. If I was standing here talking into the darkness, it would be meaningless. Totally, totally meaningless. There needs to be a hearer. There needs to be a spectator to tell me I was talking rubbish. Otherwise I wouldn't know. I would be thinking I'm talking the most profound things in the world. But I'm not, if you weren't there. That's how connected life is. Life is meaningless without you, Grant. Carol Ann. Joel. Michelle. It's true, you know. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you doing with your time? Who are you becoming? Where are you going? Who are you taking with you? That's the question. Where are you coming from and where are you going? And we don't, or we can't do this alone. We can try and isolate ourselves, but we will die. We do life together, in families, with friends, in church, in this place. Here we find a range of people that maybe we wouldn't normally journey with, but we do. Because God is with us and Jesus lives in our hearts. So that's why. And we reflect to one another and we grow with one another. We are together as His church because of Jesus. No other reason. And so we do life together in community. Community of people who belong, who see one another, who are seen by one another, seen by God. And we are indwelt by God. So there's something of God in us. So when we see, sometimes you're being seen by God, and I don't say this lightly, but God works through us. How does God meet with us? Somebody sat next to me and spoke to me. God can speak to me in my room. God can speak to me through you. That's how it works. In community, with Jesus, with one another, at home, in church, in the world, wherever you are, there are people that need to be seen, that God needs to see, that God does see, that need maybe a word from you, a word of life, provoking one another, it says in the New Testament, provoking one another to good works. So I can hear your story, and I can reflect back to you, and I can ask you a question that draws something out of you. And a conversation begins, and God begins to do something in the midst of that story. And we begin to feel alive and human, provoking one another to good works. We are not independent beings who can form a sense of self in isolation. We may say we don't care what other people think, but our sense of self is invariably shaped by how others respond to us, especially those closest to us. It's in relationships that our sense of self is formed. It's in relationships that we see one another, that we hear one another. It's in relationships that we see God and that we hear God. And so here we are today. What do you need to tell Him today? Who do you need to speak to today? For whom do you need to slow down? Take time to be with them. Listen to their story. No judgment, no fixing, just listening, just being. Who is that person? God knows. God knows who you are. God wants to touch your life today. He wants to speak to you. He wants to hear you. He wants you to come out from hiding and see you in all of who you are, the good things, the bad things. He wants to hear the good things. He wants to hear the bad things. Who are you? What do you need to tell Him today? We're going to